Okay, welcome to those people joining us. I think this is our penultimate talk of the festival, so sort of last hurrah this afternoon and then one more this evening. Hope you've all had a fantastic week, enjoying all the many varied talks that we've had, and thank you for joining us again. I feel like every time I've done a talk this week I've said on this soggy afternoon, but it is another soggy afternoon, so thank you for joining us again on yet another soggy February afternoon. Pop a hello in the chat, tell us where you're listening from. It's always nice to see how far afield we're reaching. See who we've got joining us today. We've got any familiar names. I'm just going to give everyone a minute or two to join up, and then we'll get going in a couple of minutes. Hi Caroline. Yeah, another soggy day, another soggy day. Oh yeah, we've got the Ulverston contingent. Good to see you. Still here with us. Hi Tim. So I'll just do a little bit of admin as well while we're waiting for everyone to join. Drinking sherry in Surrey. Gosh, how incredibly civilized. Marvelous. I'm on the mint tea in Cumbria, which seems slightly less glamorous, but anyway. Right, so a bit of admin before we start. I'm sure you're all in the know now, but this festival is organised completely not for profit. We do have a few costs to cover, things like our Zoom membership and hosting the website and things like that. So if you are able to make a small donation, it's always much appreciated. I'll pop the link up later in the chat. Or you can find the link on the website as well. So recommended donation of £5. Hi Kath. Oh, I've been wondering about if I'd see you on the screen this week. Nice to see your name popping up. Yeah, recommended a donation of £5 per talk. If you're just joining us as a one-off, or if you've been joining in all week, maybe £20 for the week, or whatever you can afford. Frankly, all donations really much appreciated, so that we can keep this going in the future. Also, let me just mention, we've got a couple of boxes down the bottom there. So we've got the chat function if you just want to make a comment, or say, oh, I've been there, or join in during the talk. It's nice to get a bit of interactive comments going on. But if you've got an actual question that you'd like to ask, please put that in the Q&A box, which is a separate box at the bottom there. Put your questions in there and we'll deal with them at the end of the talk, all in one go. And also, just to mention, if you are commenting on the chat, make sure your little blue bit there is to everyone, so that everyone can see it, rather than sometimes it just says to panelists and then only myself and Rob can see it. So make sure you switch that so everyone can see. We are recording this talk, so if you want to share it with friends at a later date, then it'll be up on our YouTube channel along with most of the other talks that we've done this week. So again, links from the website for that. Right, and we are up to 92 joining us this afternoon now, so I think it's nearly time to get going. I'll introduce you to Rob, who is now an old familiar face. I think this is the third year that you've joined us at the festival, I think.
Yes, indeed.
So great to see you back again with yet another wacky and wonderful adventure. For those of you that have seen Rob before, you'll know it's always an absolute treat of quirkiness. And the guitar is ready to go, which I'm delighted to see. I've had a few clues about what's coming up at the end, so that's going to be a highlight, I'm sure, to start bringing the festival to a close. Right, that's everything for me. I'm going to turn myself off and pass over to you, Rob, and then I'll appear again at the end to deal with all the questions and answers at the end of your talk. Okay, over to you.
Thanks, Nancy. Hello, everybody. Yeah, so this is a short talk about a trip I did last year going along Hadrian's Wall when I ate only Roman food along the way. And I'll actually be talking about some of the food, and I've got some food here. If you've got things like olive oil, garlic, wine vinegar, figs, bread, cheese, then feel free to tuck in as we go along. A quick disclaimer, I'm not a food historian, I'm not even a historian, I'm just a cyclist with a British Library card. This is the British Library in Boston Spa in Yorkshire, and it's not far from where I live, so I can cycle there. And that's where I did some of the research. If I get anything wrong, or if there's something you don't particularly like, then please let me know in the comments. But I've got a website, e2e.bike. There's loads of stuff on there, so by all means check that out. I'll put this up again at the end. I write about cycling for magazines such as Cycling Plus. This is this month's issue. That's not me on the cover, but that is me there. That's me on my bike, actually riding Hadrian's Wall and eating only Roman food. That's what this article is about, and it's in this month's Cycling Plus. That's the article. The photographer, for some reason, has only chosen pictures which don't show my face. Perhaps he's trying to tell me something, but that suits me, by the way. But you can see my bike there, my green bike. You'll be seeing a lot of that in the next few pictures. So yeah, food, the sort of felicitous combination of food and location. That's what I really like, when the food and the place come together in some satisfying way. So, for example, there's a hamlet called Fryup in the North York Moors. It's just north of Rosedale. Fabulous cycling around there. This road is gorgeous, downhill all the way into Fryup. And in Fryup, there's a bike hub, a bike cafe, where you can have a fry-up. You can have a fry-up in Fryup. And this isn't the only place in Britain where you can eat the name of the place. I was in Cheddar last year. Cheddar Gorge, one of the most spectacular places in England that you can cycle through, somewhere genuinely jaw-dropping. And of course, in Cheddar, I had to try cheddar in Cheddar. Similarly, when I was in Stilton a few weeks ago, Stilton is a village just south of Peterborough. It's on the A1, old A1. And I had to drop into the Bell Inn. This is the place which first sold Stilton cheese in the 1800s to travellers on the Great North Road. And obviously I wanted to drop into the hotel and have their Stilton platter, to have Stilton in Stilton. And it tasted like $1 million, which is roughly what it cost, actually. Or, for example, scones in Scone. Obviously, I'm from Yorkshire, so I call it a scone. And the place is in Scotland, so it's Scone. So it's a scone in Scone. It doesn't quite work as well, but it's one of a number of places where you can eat the food. You'll find them all over England, all over Britain. Here's a selection, and I've done quite a few of these. I've had water in water, I've had braised leeks in leeks, I've had a beer in beer, a sandwich in sandwich, and so on. But that's not what I'm talking about today quite. What I am talking about is the way that food can enhance a trip, the way that how you sustain yourself as you're going along isn't just about refueling. It can also be this insight into a culture, this insight into a place, the way it can get you meeting people that you wouldn't otherwise have met. This is the sort of thing I want to talk about today. And the first way I experienced it was in 1997 when I did my first Land's End John O'Groats, and I had this theme of only eating local food and drinking local drinks, so only stuff that was locally sourced. It wasn't entirely successful. It would probably be easier nowadays, but it was a great way to enhance the trip, and I certainly got a lot more out of it than if I'd just been doing the cycling. And you can see in this little montage of pictures, Craster kippers up there at the top, Yorkshire pudding in the middle. That was actually at my mum and dad's house in Yorkshire, and that was the nicest meal of the trip, the sort of proper traditional roast. Local beers on the right, farm stuff from farm honesty tables, you know, fresh produce from the farm just put out for people to pay with honesty boxes. You can see that. And that really got me excited about this combination of food and touring, where the food enables you to enjoy a place better. And whenever I go through somewhere that has a local speciality, I'm always dead keen to try it. So trying oysters in Brittany, in Cancale, when I was doing the French end-to-end. Obviously, this may not, you know, some people might be a bit queasy looking at this picture and thinking, oh my God, single-use plastic cutlery. Sorry about that, this was a few years ago. Local delicacies like when I was cycling in Vancouver, poutine, which is this classic sort of Canadian dish of chips, gravy and cheese. It's actually rather nice. Haggis in Scotland, obviously, that was this year. Yeah, I mean, if you go to Dublin, you've got to try the Guinness. Obviously, this wasn't all for me. I was with my friend Nigel. There was two of us. And the way that food can be part of the whole atmosphere, that you can feel you're getting the look and feel of a place. And one of the things I enjoy most about cycle touring is after a day in Spain, when you sit in the Plaza Mayor and just watch people wandering about doing the paseo, you know, this wonderful evening tradition where people just go out and walk around and you have some tapas and a drink and you just sit in that lovely atmosphere. And that combination of the cycling and the food is what works for me. I wouldn't enjoy it as much if I hadn't had the bike ride. A similar sort of thing, a counterpart really in Taiwan, when I did the end-to-end of Taiwan, each evening we were eating in the food markets, the night markets, which are just fabulous places, very bustling, very lively, and this great range of food, very fresh, inexpensive, and you know, made there in front of your eyes. In Poland, when I did the Polish end-to-end, I enjoyed eating at the mleczny bars, the milk bars, these old working people's canteens, very much associated with the Soviet era, but many still survive, and where you can get, you know, cheap basic stuff. And I always love having to survive in a different language, and it was great fun doing that in Poland. I'm one of those people that's happiest cycling by myself. I'm perfectly happy with my own company, cycling along in my little bubble. There's basically two sorts of people in the world, and I tend to avoid both. So the good thing about food is it forces me to engage, and it forces me to get talking to people in a way that I wouldn't otherwise, because you've got to eat and you've got to drink, and that's how I get talking to people. When I did the Sri Lankan end-to-end, a fabulous place to tour, by the way, really recommend it. Really easy to eat and drink on the go because the roadside opportunities are just there all the time. Every little village, every road has a juice bar or a canteen or a little store. This was one of the nicest ones, and it gave me this chance to sample all sorts of fruits I'd never had. Fruits like wood apple or mangosteen. And a very nice chap who owned it, and I said, you know, where do you get your wood apples from? And he said, that tree. I said, where do you get your mangosteens from? And he said, that tree. So it was all locally sourced stuff and not many food kilometers in that. And very social sort of things, you know, you have to eat and drink, and that gets you talking to people. And especially for people like me, it's a great way to engage. Cycleway in Bogota in Colombia, where every Sunday they close a big circuit of city centre roads and just turn it over to cyclists, pedestrians, walkers, people in wheelchairs, etc. And you get this fabulous social atmosphere. Lots of stalls get set up, lots of food and drink, other things as well. You can get your hair cut, or you can do dance classes and so on. And I particularly enjoyed the corn on the cob there. And finally in Cuba, again, this was way off the beaten track, Camagüey, where I didn't find anybody speaking English. So, you know, you have to survive in Spanish, which is great fun. And I think my memory serves correct, this was a sort of rum thing, not exactly a mojito, but a rum cocktail for 15p, which was obviously a lot, it would have cost a lot more in the touristy places. But I love places like this where you feel a traveller, not a tourist. You're off the beaten track, nobody speaks English, nothing is being contrived for your benefit. It's just the local stuff. And that's what I really enjoy, when you feel that you're actually participating in rather than just observing the local social culture. So with all that in mind, when I planned to do Hadrian's Cycleway last year, I thought, how can I bring an extra dimension to it? And of course, the food dimension seemed the thing to do. I thought, why don't I do it eating only food that the Roman auxiliaries, the Roman soldiers on the wall, the food that they would recognize, just to try and get an enhanced feeling from the trip. I'd done all the bits of Hadrian Cycleway before, but this was the first time I was doing it all in one. So it's National Cycle Network 72. It's about 140 miles if you follow it exactly, more like 150 or 160 when you do it in practice. It's essentially in two sections. It's the first section up the coast, which is all flat, basically. That's from Ravenglass to Bowness. And then from Bowness to Newcastle, you're sort of paralleling Hadrian's Wall. Hadrian's Wall, built by the Romans, the limit of the empire, built in about 100 AD, although it went through various incarnations on either side of that date. Named after the Emperor Hadrian. It wasn't called Hadrian's Wall in his day, but that's what we now call it. And he was the emperor who really consolidated the empire and built the wall in pretty much the form that we think of it today. Hadrian, very interesting character, very cultured, very into his Greek culture, a ruthless leader, but an effective one, as far as I know, a very effective one, and a very interesting character, adopted, Spanish, gay, but most noteworthy of all and most striking was that he was the first Roman emperor in history to have a beard. So he was quite a trendsetter. This was the Roman Empire at the time of Hadrian's accession. So all the Roman Empire is in green, and as you can see, it went all around the Mediterranean. So you're talking about an empire that lasted many hundreds of years, 500 years or so, and embraced many cultures, many cuisines. And in Britain, the Romans were here for about 300, 400 years, but the Romans never really got up north. They got about as far as Carlisle, Newcastle, few sorties further north from there, but they decided it just wasn't worth battling anymore. So they decided to cap the empire just there, and that's where they built the wall. And the wall was various things at various times. It could sometimes be a barrier to stop invaders. Sometimes in other places, it could just be a notional line in the sand. Sometimes it was just a checkpoint. Sometimes it was a symbol. So the wall fulfilled many different functions. What did the Romans ever do for us, as John Cleese's character asks in the film Life of Brian? Quite a lot. Their effect on British life was enormous and lasting. All these things: market economy, roads, wine, central heating, farming, writing, half of our words, that's if you include the Greek words which came in via Latin. Roads, we had roads before. We had roads like the Ridgeway or the Icknield Way, chalk ridges. But the Romans brought the idea of planned road networks, of civil engineering. Wine, they had a big wine culture. The time they were in Britain coincided with the golden age of Roman winemaking. They knew all about terroir, they knew all about grape varieties, they knew about vintages. They made some apparently cracking wines that they could put down and would last for 50 years. The white wine was the really good stuff. That's what the rich people had. There was a lot of rough, mass-produced red wine as well. They tried planting vines in Britain with very little success. Apparently they had some in Essex, round about there, but it never really took off. But all sorts of other stuff. Three-course dinners, that's from Rome. The idea of a starter, main course pudding, that's Roman. And lots of foods. They introduced loads of food to Britain. Parsnips, radishes, beets, endive, lettuce, broad beans, turnips, cabbage. Better carrots as well. This is the mark of civilization, better carrots. Plums, damsons, walnuts, dill, fennel, marjoram, mint, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. They were big in their herbs, and herbs and spices, big part of Roman cuisine, big part of Roman cooking. And if you get into it, which lots of people have, there's loads of books out there telling you how to cook Roman recipes. The herbs and spices are a big part of it, and it's almost like the way we think of Indian cooking today, with balancing lots and lots of herbs and spices in order to create that particular blend of flavors. There's a lot of that in Roman cooking. And in return, what did we give back to the Romans? Well, there was beer, cervisia, as it was called in Latin. which I was pleased to learn. That's where the Spanish word comes from, cerveza or cerveza, Castilian. The Celts had beer, they had a strong brewing culture, and the Romans enthusiastically embraced it. Apparently, I've read some things that say the beer, of course, was weaker than today. I've read other things that said the beer, of course, was much stronger than today, more like barley wine. So evidently there was a range of beer types, but it was all brewed from wheat rather than barley, apparently. What else? Well, that's about it, really. It was beer. That's about what we gave them. Lots of things the Romans didn't have, and this is what I would have to do without on the trip. No New World stuff, no potatoes, tomatoes, chili, chocolate, none of that Mesoamerican stuff, no bananas. Obviously no tea or coffee, that was a bit of a problem. No forks, they just had spoons and knives, and no bicycles, but obviously I couldn't really do the trip without a bicycle. But they did have lots of stuff, and I've got some of that stuff here which we'll taste as we go along. The Romans had bread, lots of different types of bread, leavened, unleavened, some with seeds, some with fruit in it. The Romans wouldn't be surprised by anything they'd find in Waitrose's fancy bread counter. Cheese, they had hard sheep's and hard goat's cheese, not cow's cheese. Vegetables, lentils, olive oil, a big thing. Olive oil, clearly, that it was exported all around the empire. Garlic, wine was a big export as well. They shipped it to Britain in these huge amphorae, 30-litre, so 40-bottle containers. And a 40-bottle container cost about the same as a slave. So down with slavery, drink wine instead. Nuts, meat, shellfish, honey. Honey was your go-to sweetener. That was how you would sweeten dishes. Lots of herbs. Herbs with unfamiliar names, things forgotten today mostly, things like costmary, spikenard, mastic, laser, silphium, a mysterious herb that went extinct in Roman times with no idea what it tasted like. And all the classy stuff like sausages, custard, semolina, and cake. But let's get riding. Let's have a look at the trip. This is my bike. Again, I'm at Newcastle Station. And those panniers are full of food. And as you can see, the sign says, laden weight not to exceed 1 metric ton. So I was just about okay. Little reminder of the route again. So we're going to start in Ravenglass down on the coast. And Ravenglass has, a great thing about the route is there's a railway all the way with plenty of intermediate stops. So that gives you a lot of flexibility for when you do it. And you can take maybe 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, and it's an easy logistical way to organise it. Ravenglass and Newcastle have regular train services, and there's no problem with bike spaces, it's just walk on. So this is where you start. All roads lead to Rome. They don't actually, most of them lead to Carlisle from here, but here we are in Ravenglass, which is famous for its bathhouse. So this was a Roman bathhouse, well used by the soldiers who, the information boards tell us, would fraternize freely with the locals. The Roman soldiers wouldn't be British, they were from the rest of the empire, often places like Gaul or Belgium, occasionally modern day Syria or Tunisia or Spain and so on. And they would fraternize with the local women. There's plenty of intermarriage. Being a Roman soldier, who they would have been conscripted under various degrees of willingness, but if you could stick it out and you did your 25 years, you were rewarded with Roman citizenship, and often you would get a little plot of land, and your children would all be Roman citizens as well. So it was quite a pragmatic approach from Rome to try and integrate people into the Roman way of life. Certainly happened here, and also the boards tell us the Roman bathhouse was very much like a modern leisure centre. You would go there for not just a bath, but to hang out with your friends, to have a drink, to have something to eat, and to meet people. And they certainly enjoyed the local beer here. The bathhouse is one of the very few Roman remains in Britain that you can bump your head on. Usually Roman remains are just the foundations, but here, as you can see, a lot of the walls are still standing. So Route 72 begins here, and straight away takes you on a ford across here. I didn't try the ford. I went out and just went on the bridge alternative instead. And the first few miles are actually the most challenging in terms of surface. The first few miles, you'll get a range of things. You get a bit of sand and a bit of that plastic mesh and some slightly muddy bits. But if you do it, don't get downhearted, because the first 3 or 4 miles are the worst. After that, it's tarmac virtually all the way. So it's all this sort of stuff. Yeah, occasionally you get this, occasionally a bit of sand, and you go past Sellafield or Calder Hall, Windscale. It's gone through various names. Nice to know that it's a nuclear licensed site, isn't it? There's far too many unlicensed nuclear establishments around. And you get a good view of the old reactor. That's the old Calder Hall reactor, finished in the fast breeder, I think. Finished in 62, completed in 62, was working until 1981, and made safe at some time in the next 50,000 years. Some people are a bit concerned about all the nuclear stuff that goes on in Sellafield, but I've heard only glowing reports. So this was my first stop for lunch, and this is where I think we're actually going to have something to eat now. This was at Seascale, which is a little sort of beach resort just up the coast from Windscale or Sellafield. And as you can see, that's me having my lunch. So what is reasonably authentic Roman food? Well, I took expert advice on this. So for breakfast, you would have porridge. Now I've got some porridge. Here's some I made earlier. I don't know if you can see that. That's porridge. Their porridge was wheat porridge, not oats porridge. Oat porridge was just for, or oats were just for animals. And if, well, it's not too bad. It's like couscous. And I don't really like couscous, to be honest. The only way I could make it sort of edible was by putting lots of raisins in and a bit of honey and some cinnamon and nutmeg, which makes it taste like a pudding. So it's okay, but it's not really breakfast. It's not really porridge as I know it. They've also got bread, olives, cheese, raisins, and wine, of course, a vital part of a Roman breakfast. Lunch, pretty similar. Bread, olive oil, cheese, again, cold meats. Now, cold meats, this is often stuff that the Romans, I'm told, would have taken with them. Here's some biltong. This is very, very close to the kind of dried meat that the Romans would have. I can't say I'm a biltong fan. It's rather like chewing bovril. So that's what biltong looks like, a sort of thin, dark brown bit of flattened meat. A very, very beefy, very umami bovril sort of flavour. And the Roman soldiers would have a lot of that. Lots of cheese too. Sheep's cheese, goat's cheese, like I say. I decided the nearest was manchego. Here's some manchego from Lidl, £2. Nice and salty, really good on-the-go stuff. Now this I really did enjoy having for my lunch. Bit of flatbread to go with it. Bit of olive oil in there. Lots of garlic. Oh, cracking stuff. Lovely. Pleasantly surprised that I was really enjoying a lot of snack food. Leftovers, yeah, you'd often have leftovers from the night before. Fruit, bit of fruit. Dried figs. Again, this is like, I think this was a quid. Quid from Lidl. Dried figs. This was my little discovery. On the go food, on the go quick sugar rush. Dried figs are just ace. So nice. And wine, of course. Dinner, three-course dinner was a Roman thing. Typically they'd have shellfish or eggs for a starter, some sort of cooked meats, vegetables for the main course, cakes, sweets for pudding, beer and wine. Now, you're probably thinking with all that wine, you should be hydrating, and you'd be absolutely right. So how did the Romans hydrate? They hydrated with posca. Now, posca is water, but you can't just drink water because it could have bugs in it. So you need to kill off the bugs. And what better way of killing off the bugs than wine? And that is what the Romans would hydrate with. You'd have 2/3 water. And remember, this is on expert advice. So I'm only following expert scientific advice. So 2/3 water, 1/3 wine. And of course, to be authentic, I got the cheapest, roughest Spanish wine I could find. And so you have this stuff, looks a bit like blackcurrant juice. And tastes very much like watered down wine, like watered down cheap wine. Right, that was actually okay. I didn't overhydrate, don't worry. So having hydrated diligently, I had a bit more lunch at St. Bees. Now you may recognise St. Bees Head, that's where people start the Wainwright Coast to Coast walk. One of these mysterious saints like St. Bee and St. Ive and St. Ab and Eb and Ob and Ib. Carrying on up the coast to Whitehaven, which again, many of you will be familiar with. It's the start of the coast to coast bike route, which goes from Whitehaven or Workington to Newcastle or Sunderland. Starts here. Some rather interesting cycle parking there in Whitehaven. And going into Workington, you get this lovely romantic arbour that you can cycle through. It's all very Game of Thrones, isn't it? And virtually all of this stretch up the coast is on rail trail. It's virtually all flat. It's all paved. And, you know, it's all really rather nice. Lots of this kind of stuff. Lots more of this kind of stuff. And finally, getting towards the end of the day, the sun was out, you get views back down to the Lake District. This is looking south, and you can just see some of the northern fells of the lakes there. And so I got to Carlisle, which was where I was staying for the night. And this is where I was going to have my dinner. Now, my dinner I'd prepared thanks to Sally Granger, Dr. Sally Granger, also known as Sally Grocock, Roman food researcher and writer. She's written all sorts of books. She's written one book just on fish sauce. Now, fish sauce was a big thing in Roman cookery. They put fish sauce on everything. If you get Thai fish sauce, I think it's called nam pla, that's very close. Get Thai fish sauce, dilute it with a bit of grape juice, and you've got something very close to Roman's fish sauce, which they just slathered about everywhere. Oh, it really smells fishy. To the untrained nose, it smells like rotten fish, but once it's on the food, it actually adds something very, very special. So Sally Granger was very helpful, and she's got various videos. Here she is in her garden doing some Roman cookery. This is a YouTube video, and she shows you how to make various recipes from this classic Roman cookbook called the Cookbook of Apicius. And she's doing it all obviously on authentic stuff with authentic foods and in an authentic way. And she gave me a recipe for my stew in the evening. So I made the stew at home, took it with me. This was the stew. Oh no, that's the stew. We'll get to the stew in a minute. To get some herbs, I went to some local herb gardens in York. There's various schemes like this all over the country. You know, it's just a free public herb garden maintained by volunteers, and you can snip bits off, help yourself. And from this one in the centre of York and a couple of others around York, I managed to get things like sorrel, lovage, borage and rue, things that you wouldn't find in the supermarket, but which are useful for Roman cookery. And if you like messing about with food, this is great fun, working with these unfamiliar flavours, working with this new palate. So as you're tasting as you go along and you think, oh, could do with a bit of zing in there. I'll put some sorrel in to give it a lemony zing. Or you think, just need something bitter to round off the flavours. I'll add some rue, and so on. So this was the stew that I made. It looks a bit like an industrial accident, I know, but it was absolutely delicious. It was a pork, bean and cabbage stew. Fairly straightforward recipe. Nothing unusual or surprising about the method. It's just, you saute your onion, you fry the bits of meat and the cabbage, you add the stock, you add the beans and add a few herbs and then just simmer it for ages. And it was gorgeous. And this was the one thing that really turned me on to Roman cookery. So the second day, we're now doing the wall section, and this is where the interesting scenic stuff begins to happen. So from Carlisle, which is where I stayed, to Bowness, which is where the wall starts, it's about 10 miles. So I cycled out and got to the start of the wall section. And here we are at Bowness, at the old fort of Maia, where the old Roman fort was. More signs pointing to Rome. And some cows, and the cows had been roaming out on the sands and they had to be rounded up by the farmer. She actually had to drive a tractor out on the sand, which was quite impressive, I thought. And as I started, first person I met was this person. Jacqueline Gregg is her name. She'd just finished walking the entire route of Hadrian's Wall in Roman costume, which was pretty admirable. She'd done it to raise money for charity. The only compromise she made, apart from the rucksack, was her boots. She didn't wear sandals, she did it in walking boots, which I think was a very wise decision. And as you can see, even her dog has a little Roman headdress on there. So hats off to Jacqueline for that. And off we went. The first few miles of the wall are not really very obvious. Out here, it was all very marshy, and they didn't need a massive bricks and mortar thing. They just had a few forts and earth banks in between. This was a place where you didn't need a huge military fortification. You just really needed something a bit more notional, just to show where the border was. And you head up that road, obviously that dead straight Roman road, and it's all dead flat till you get back to Carlisle, which, as I'm sure you all know, this is a penfold hexagonal. Of course, that's the classic early pillar box. It's actually a replica, and the reason it's here is that Carlisle was the first place in Britain to have a roadside postbox in 1853, and that's a replica. Carlisle's a bit of a border feeling town in some ways, as you can see. And yeah, the signposting isn't foolproof, as you can see, because I got lost. I've managed to follow the walker's route by mistake, so I'm bumping along this sort of thing and having to go across fields. Eventually I found my way back, and NCN 72 does do some odd diversions. I'm not entirely convinced by their route finding just out of Carlisle. At least I did go through a place called How, which did make me think, are there any other places named after question words? And there are quite a few in Britain. There's how, where, who, which and why. There's a near miss in Cornwall, the Saint Wens, and there's a place called What in Jamaica, apparently. But this is all we've got in Britain. I did have a look at the street atlases to see if I could find, what street where or a which street why, but I couldn't. So that's about as good as we'll do. And now we get on to the really interesting bit. This is where it's at. This is the action. The best bit for the wall in terms of scenery, museums, hills, beer. And it's that sort of second quarter, and you're about 15, 20 miles out of Carlisle, you go past somewhere called Lanercost Priory, and suddenly, everything having been flat so far, you go up a bank, a steep bank, to a place called Bank. And here is Bank. And at last you've got some masonry, some original Roman wall, and you've now got scenery. And this is the stretch to concentrate on. If you want to dawdle around here, this is where you'll get the best experiences. You get to Birdoswald and you see the first real chunky stretch of wall, and this is where it all starts to get very atmospheric. Lots of this sort of thing. There's a museum at Birdoswald, very well worth visiting. The road sometimes splits away. Here the wall goes off a bit like those pictures of the Great Wall of China where it goes vaulting over hills. This is the nearest you'll get in Britain to that sort of thing. In the distance you can see the hills of Wynsill. I just stopped in a bus shelter to shelter from some rain. You can go along a main road or you can go along a track, and the track is sort of, it's okay for a touring bike or a hybrid. If you're on a road bike, you wouldn't want to go along the track, you'd stick on the main road. On a previous trip I went along the track and that was all okay, and you probably get a better feel for the scenery from the track. That's between Greenhead and Wantsbrood, a place called Wantsbrood. If you go on the main road, it's not too bad. That surprisingly is not a Roman road, it's a military road. And that B road, Sustrans studiously avoids and takes you down to Haltwhistle, which I think is actually unnecessary. I haven't ever found this road to be too bad. It's a bit busy, but not all that bad. And yeah, so I went up that road. There's a nice little detour you can have. It's a 3 sides of a square detour when you get to Twisebrood, and if you come north, you go through some really quite thrilling and rugged scenery, and that's where you get some of the best views of the wall itself. You actually go through little notches in the wall a couple of times, and you get a lot of this sort of thing. That is Wynsill, this cliff-like inland formation, and this is where you'll get most of your best pictures. And some good tourist facilities as well. There's a visitor centre, there's a cafe called The Sill, and you can see this is the original wall going up there and doing things like, as you can see on the right of that picture, actually going up and over hills. You go past Sycamore Gap. This apparently was in the film Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves in 1991. And if you've seen the tree, you can try the beer in Twisebrood, because there's a pub in Twisebrood called the Twisebrood Pub, and you can have a pint of Sycamore Gap in there. And beer, of course, this is all very authentic because the Romans had beer, we know that. They wouldn't have had hops, of course. Hops didn't come in until many hundreds of years after the Romans left. To preserve the beer, they used different things. Their beer would have tasted perhaps more like Belgian lambics or Finnish sahti, brews which use things like fruit or pine twigs to do the role that hops normally serve of preserving the beer. And there's Vindolanda, which is a cracking museum, well worth visiting. You can see the extensive remains of the old fort, main fort, and of the village. There's little models, you can see how it used to look. And there's a replica of the wall itself. They built this in the 70s. This was then, as the best scholarship had, of what the wall would have looked like. So if you go along here, you can actually think of what it might have felt like 1800 years ago to be walking up here past the wall itself. You can also see the oldest, in fact the only, Roman milestone in situ next to a road. It's all a bit corroded now, but there's a replica in the museum, and that's what the milestone used to look like. And it says at the bottom, 20 miles to Corris, that's Corbridge, so 20 miles to Corbridge. And that 20 miles is along this road, Steingate, Old Roman Road, one of the highlights of the entire trip for me. If you're lucky enough to have a big westerly like I did, it was a huge westerly, 25 miles an hour tailwinds, and I was bombing along here. Roman soldiers would would march about 12, 15 miles, that sort of thing in a day, perhaps at a pinch 20 miles. I did 20 miles in less than an hour and I hardly even turned a pedal. It was great. Got to Hexham, had some more food. And after Hexham, you actually avoid the wall pretty much totally, but with good reason. You go along the Tyne and you're alongside the Tyne for the last 25 miles or so. The reason is that if you go inland, which I have done on previous trips, there's not really that much of the wall left. There's only about 8 miles in total of Hadrian's wall left in terms of bricks and mortar that you can see. There's a bit of this in the eastern half, but it's just a few mounds. It's a much better walk than it is cycle, because you're cycling along sort of wiggly B roads and side roads, and this is about all you'd ever see, and you'd have to sort of come off the road to see it. So instead, the route takes you along the river, and now you're into a built environment, an urban environment. It's all industrial, post-industrial, and it's bridges, loads of bridges. You start at a place called Ovingham with these Meccano bridges, quite exciting to go across. Come across here, and from here, you're on something like this, a tarmac rail trail or tramway, pretty much all the way for 20 miles into Newcastle, into the centre of Newcastle. So lots of this sort of stuff. Good surface, lots of bridges, industrial heritage, and you get into Newcastle and yeah, this is Bridge City. Bridges of all sorts of different eras. You come at the famous waterside and past the Millennium Bridge, this sort of winking bridge. The two, it's sort of like an eyelid. The bottom comes up like that to let ships go underneath, and then goes back down. And you're then on a tramway rail trail for the last few miles until you get to the end of the trail. You can take a little detour just down the Tyne Tunnel, which has this unique feature of a cyclist-only tunnel underneath the river. It's what, about a quarter of a mile or something, but worth a look. And you get to the end of the trip here. Again, another sign, Rome signposted again, not Carlisle, but you can see, yep, Segedunum Museum. That's another museum. All the museums are really good, by the way. Any one of them is good. Vindolanda particularly, the Roman Army Museum in Greenhead particularly, they're excellent. There's an old bathhouse that was only discovered in 2016, which you can have a look at. And you finish here at Segedunum at the museum. And I actually cycled the wall, obviously. So just to sum up, that's Hadrian's Cycleway. Yeah, take about 3 to 5 days. If you're only doing the wall section, you can do it quite leisurely, in quite a leisurely fashion in 2 days. You could take 3, plenty of places to stay along the way, Carlisle, Hexham, Haltwhistle, Barden Mill, all sorts of places, and easy to get to by train and very flexible. If it's only scenery you're after, well, I'd only give it 3 stars, because if all you want is scenery, that's what Scotland's for, that's what the Yorkshire Dales are for. There is scenery, but it's that bit in the middle, really. But in terms of history and variety and reward, I think it's a cracker. I think it's one of the most satisfying all-round long-distance trips you can do in Britain. And you can do it on any food you like, by the way. You are allowed to take chocolate and chips. Always finish with a song. That's what my dad said. I don't know why he said that, because he had a butcher's shop, but we're going to finish with a song anyway. Now, I was never into Blondie. Prog rock was my thing, but I know lots of my friends, boys and girls, had a bit of a crush on Debbie Harry. Not me, possibly because, as far as I knew, she wasn't interested in bikes. But it turns out, look at this photo of Debbie Harry and Chris Stein, who's stood next to her there. They were a couple until 1989. They parted amicably, they still tour together. But here they are in their New York flat, and look, there's a bike. Now, those with a sharper eye and more knowledge than me may be able to identify the group set. I suspect it's Campagnolo. I suspect it's sort of mid-80s. But obviously, Debbie Harry and Chris Stein, at least one of them, were into cycling after all. So this got me thinking, what songs should they have written about cycling? Well, this is the song. It's not Heart of Glass, which, as you know, is number 66 in the all-time top 100 singles of all time in Britain. It's Shard of Glass. And I always heard it in my head as Shard of Glass. So I've written the song as it should be, a song about the misfortunes that you get when you cycle. Now, this is where you at home can join in. I'm afraid we didn't have a blonde wig in the dressing up box, so it's got to be a pink wig. But you can sing along now. Here's the words. Music maestro, please. Once I had a puncture, it happened so fast. Soon turned out was a shard of glass. Opened up my bag, only to find I'd gone and left my pump behind. Hit the derailleur, my hanger was bent. I couldn't change gear wherever I went. Opened up my bag, only to find I'd gone and left my tools behind. Cloudless sky, haven't got a sun hat and I'm gonna fry. Didn't bring my sun cream and I don't know why. My water bottle's empty and I need to pee, but ain't no place that I can go in. Ooh, whoa. Ooh, whoa. Once I had a puncture, it happened so fast. Soon turned out was a shard of glass. Opened up my bag, only to find I'd left my cash and cards behind. Now the rain, and I've come without my jacket once again. If things go on like this, then I will go insane. It's getting dark and now I find my lights not charged. They're dim and frankly so am I. Ooh, whoa. Ooh, whoa. On my own, didn't bring a map or bring my mobile phone. I'll have to beg a lift or get a taxi home. I tried to get the train, but all the space for bikes was blocked by someone's wheelie cases. Ooh, whoa. Thank you. That's the end of the talk.
Lots of people are writing applause in the chat, but given that I'm the only one that can actually be heard, I'll do all the clapping for everyone else as well. Massive rounds of applause. Just the wig is really special. Yeah, suits you. You should, yeah, you're rocking it. That was such a great talk, Rob. Thank you so much. There's lots and lots of praise coming in on the chat, saying how much everyone's really enjoyed it and how fun and informative it was. So thank you. Yeah, excellent performance from Debbie Harry's long lost brother and the Wiggis Hybrids. Exactly. Yeah, brilliant. So we've got a few questions if we can pick up on those. I love some of the questions in the chat during the talk, like such as, where is pasta from then? And
pasta's supposedly from China, yeah, brought by in the time of Marco Polo Some people reckon that Marco Polo never actually went to China because in his accounts of China, he misses out loads of stuff that he thought, why hasn't he mentioned the writing? But it's popularly thought to have been brought across by Marco Polo, or in that time, sort of Venetian Italy from China. So pasta's not Roman, it's Chinese.
There we go. Yeah, fantastic. And okay, another one that came up in the chat was, what did the Romans call Hadrian's Wall?
I think they just called it that wall.
The wall.
Yeah, I don't know, it's a good question. If I find out, I'll let you know.
Yeah, I'm curious. I assumed they called it Hadrian's Wall, but yeah, if you think about it, that doesn't really make sense. Right, let's see what else we've got here. So, this is an interesting question. Not so much to do with your ride, but are there any other examples of Roman walls at other extremities of the empire in Europe, or did they just block off the Scots?
That's a good question. I don't know about the rest of Europe. Certainly, there's another one in Scotland called the Antonine Wall, which goes from Glasgow to Edinburgh. There's not all that much you can see of it now. It's not as impressive as Hadrian's Wall. And about 3 times I've cycled from Glasgow to Edinburgh along the towpath of the canal, which is a fantastic ride. It's dead flat, car free all the way, 60 miles from Glasgow to Edinburgh, all along well-surfaced towpath. But when you get to Falkirk, there's various bits of the Antonine Wall that you can see. Now, you know the picture that I showed of sort of the mound, moundy remains of Hadrian's Wall? That's all you can see of the Antonine Wall. But I've never actually managed to find it. I always got lost in Falkirk. So if anybody knows what it looks like, please let me know.
Okay, that's a good treasure hunt for the rest of us. What kind of sweets did the Romans have? Surely no sugar, from Anne Wilson.
As far as I know, they certainly had cakes, they certainly had custard. The sweetness was all honey. That was their go-to sweetener. So it would all taste of honey. But certainly, people had sweets to take around with them, and yeah, it was a regular part of the 3-course dinner.
I'm so glad you got cake. I was worried about the idea of a cycle tour without cake. The
thing I missed most actually was there's the tea. It took a real effort to not have the bed and breakfast tea in the morning.
I bet.
So authentic.
Yeah. So as well, it was great to hear some little bits at the start from some of your end-to-end trips as well. So for anyone listening that doesn't know this, Rob is collecting international end-to-ends. He's been all over the world doing different countries, and you've got a couple coming up this year, hopefully. Is that you were telling me at the start? So Portugal and Slovakia.
Yeah, so hopefully Slovakia in April and Portugal later in the year, we hope.
Brilliant. So there's a couple of questions about those trips. Andrew Sykes is asking, where does the French end-to-end start and finish? But I suspect it's a route you've invented.
Oh, very good question, Andrew. Yeah, very good question, because I rode a route in a book called France en vélo, France by bike, co-authored by Hannah Reynolds, who of course gave a talk on Tuesday, I think, the 1,000,001 Tips. Really good book, really good route, thoroughly recommend it. I'm not sure how easy the book is to get now, but it's a sort of light blue book, France en vélo, Saint-Malo to Nice, and a really nicely thought out route on quiet roads that gives you a conspectus of French landscapes, of French regions, of French culture, loads of culinary interest as well. I could have done a talk easily just about the food I had, just about the cakes that I had in that. So yeah, that was it, and recommend that. Okay,
great, brilliant. Let's see what else we've got here. Lots of people asking, as ever, about the songs. There's requests for you to share the lyrics. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe
I'll have a word with my agent. Yeah, I'll put it up on the CTF Facebook page if that's.
Yeah, that's a good shout. Put it on the Facebook page. Yeah, brilliant. And lots of requests for if and when we ever do manage to have a real face-to-face festival again, or any sort of gathering. Obviously, you're going to be our headline act. You'll have to bring your guitar.
Cheese head on that. It's really nice. This manchego cheese, I could get down to Lidl now, guys.
I love that it's still Lidl. It might be Roman food, but it's still hanging out in supermarket car parks eating cheese. That's all good. Good cycle tours end up with that. Brilliant. Right, I'm just trying to scroll down here. Oh, hang on, one more. Oh yeah, that's a great tip, and I'm just going to share that as well. Someone saying that they set off from Ravenglass to Newcastle and returned on the coast to coast to Ulverston. That's a nice route as well, effectively doing coast to coast to coast. Yeah, brilliant. Good tips on the chat here as well. Brilliant. Right, I am going to pop up my usual links in the chat now. Maybe that's not working. There we go. For anyone who hasn't managed to find either the YouTube channel where you can watch back through previous talks from the festival, or also the donate button, I've popped that in the link as well. If you want to hear any more about Rob's adventures, some of his previous talks are up there on the YouTube channel, and his previous songs as well, obviously, and also lots of great articles in those magazines that you shared with us at the start as well. So you can check out some of his other adventures there, and maybe hear about his Portugal.
And massive stuff on the website, e2e.bike.
Brilliant. Great. Okay, so we'll wrap it up there. Thanks so much again for a fantastically entertaining talk, and thank you for everyone for joining us as well. And yeah, just one more slot to go at 8 o'clock for anyone who needs that last ditch hit of festival wonderfulness this evening. And you can glug through the rest of your wine whilst watching that. Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, thanks very much, everyone, and have a nice evening. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you for watching, everybody. Bye.